Welcome to the Ghostly Gallery podcast, a place where we explore the world of horror and mystery in film, television, literature, and in popular culture. Well, greetings, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Gallery. My name is Bruce Markison, and as always, I am joined by my trusty co-host and producer, Tracy Asteria. Tracy, how are you this week?
I'm doing really great, Bruce. How's everything going with you?
Well, things are going well, and I'm especially excited for this week's episode because, as you know, Tracy, I think as you know, my favorite actor of all time is the great Boris Karloff. Absolute legend, accrued over 200 film and television credits, of course, appeared in those three wonderful Frankenstein films in the 1930s, was also in The Body Snatcher, The Black Cat, The Raven, many, many other classic films. And we have a chance on this week's episode to talk to someone very much connected to Boris Karloff and his legacy. We have the opportunity to talk to what I would consider horror and Hollywood royalty. Our guest is Sara Karloff. Sara oversees Karloff Enterprises and is the daughter of the master of horror, the legendary Boris Karloff. Sara, it's with tremendous pleasure that we welcome you to the Ghostly Gallery. We thank you for the opportunity. How are you this evening?
I couldn't be better. I'm so pleased to be on your show.
Well, it's a real privilege and an opportunity for Tracy and I, and it's something we're really looking forward to having you on. Grateful for this chance. Let's go back to the very beginning for you. You were born in Los Angeles by great coincidence on your father's 51st birthday. I love that worked out in such a way. Tell us, if you would, Sara, about growing up in Southern California in the 1940s and 50s, growing up in Hollywood. What was that like as a young child growing up in that LA culture?
Well, actually, I was born in Hollywood, in the Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital, and we lived in Beverly Hills. And it was lovely. It was beautiful. I went to school there until the age of 7, and then I moved to San Francisco, and that was wonderful living there. So I'm a born and raised Californian.
I didn't realize that you moved to San Francisco. Beautiful city. My mother was a travel agent, and probably her favorite city in the United States was San Francisco. Wonderful community.
Oh, it was. It's seen its hard times of late, but it was a wonderful city to grow up in.
How about growing up, first in Hollywood? Your father by then had established himself as a superstar of films, particularly horror films. I imagine that you had a lot of opportunities to talk to and meet actors and actresses and producers. That must have been very exciting for you, no?
Well, it's really no different than meeting anybody's family's friends. That's what they are. They're my father's family's friend and his friends and the people with whom he worked. But to a child, that's what they are. They're your parents' friends, and you don't think of them as, what do you do for a living, or are you famous, or can I have your autograph, or anything like that. They're simply your family's friends. And that's the way I was raised.
Of your father's friends, were there any that really kind of caught your fancy, that you really became close to and particularly looked forward to having them come over or hanging out with you?
Well, I think some of my father's closest friends were not in the industry at all.
Mm.
They were just friends for other reasons. But I know that Jimmy and Lucille Gleason, Jimmy was a character actor, and the Gleasons were very close friends of my parents.
Yes, Sarah, I just want to say it is such a pleasure to meet you. And I'm so grateful that you could join us tonight. And I was wondering, growing up with such a legendary dad, what was it like being around someone who was larger than life in the horror industry?
he was he was a typical English gentleman. He did not wear his makeup home, so he was not horrific in any sense of the word. He was had a wonderful, typical English sense of humor. He was gentle and kind and a good listener. He was a lovely human being. He was an avid reader. Um, he was the antithesis of the roles he played, so that um, at home, off stage, off set, well, on set, he was still a typical British gentleman, and he was known for being very kind to his co-actors, and he had he was admired and respected by his fellow actors and adored by those who knew him personally. So at home, it was no different than anybody's father. He was a gentle Englishman and could not have been more different than the roles he played.
Did you get used to, I guess, people treating him as a legend, like as when you were a child and going out in public? Did people stop and talk and try to get autographs from your dad at all? Do you recall?
Very riding on an elevator with him was an experience because people didn't know whether or not to mind their manners, and in general they did. There was a lot of nudging and going on, but really, by and large, the public was very respectful. Now, once we stepped off the elevator, if you happened to turn around quickly, they would all be, "Hey, that was Boris Karloff. Did you know that was Boris Karloff?" And there'd be some pointing going on. But by and large, everybody respected his privacy. If fans talked to him, he was very cordial, very polite, very accommodating of his fans, very appreciative of his fans. But he was a very private man, very modest, and very grateful for his fans, so that he treated them with great respect and appreciation, whether he was in public or in private.
Sara, I understand that even with all of his success, this king of horror, this master of horror, and of course that was what he became known for, you really did not become a fan of horror. That's what I've read anyway. Is that true?
It couldn't be more true. It's very bad casting me as my father's daughter. I leave the room during Murder, She Wrote. I wear dark glasses if I find myself in a situation where I am in the audience of a scary movie. I wear dark glasses and close my eyes. I truly am a wuss. I don't like scary movies. I don't like to be discomforted, and it's a well-known fact that I'm a scaredy cat.
So he didn't try to force this on you, even though this was his job, this was his profession, what he was great at. He never put pressure on you saying, I really would like you to give these movies a try. That never happened?
Heavens, no.
Yeah.
Never put pressure on anybody. And he didn't bring his work home. He really left it on the doorstep of the studio.
Yeah. Of course, your father helped define the classic monster genre, the 1930s and 40s. Let's talk a little bit about his roles in those three Frankenstein films, beginning with the original in 1931. What did you think it was about that character of Frankenstein's monster that connected, resonated so deeply with audiences? Audiences really took to that monster. Why do you think that was?
Oh, I think my father's um, gentleness of spirit showed through. I think the way he portrayed the character, it was clear that the monster was the victim and not the perpetrator. Um, and he always said the kids got it. Kids understood that he was the victim and not the perpetrator.
And I think that's a great point that you make. Many times, especially in horror movies today, we see villains, monsters, they're portrayed as completely evil. There's not a good side to them. There's no understanding of why they became the way they were. And your father was so good at making his character sympathetic. There were times, there were scenes when you watch those movies where you actually felt badly for him. And it seemed like he really made that conscious effort to show that part of the character.
Well, I think it was his own character coming through. Um, but I think the roles he played and the way he played them were part of him, and not the villain part, but the gentle Englishman part. And he played them the way he was in many instances, and it just wasn't true that the roles were all villains. They mainly they made a mistake and they had to pay for it, or a mistake was made and he was blamed, or in the case of the monster, he was not really to blame. He was created by and mistakenly the wrong brain was put in. I mean, there are all sorts of, I guess, excuses that could be made, but I think his own gentle nature came through most of the time in most of the roles he played.
Sarah, what was your father's favorite part of his work? Was it just the craft of his acting? Was it the impact of his roles? Or was there something else that really sparked an interest in him?
He loved what he did. He
Mm.
loved being an actor. He had no professional training. He smuggled his way into theaters when he was growing up just so that he could be around the theater, just so he could see the theater. He he told the story on himself that his first job in repertory theater in Canada, his salary was $30 a week when the curtain went up on the show, and his salary was $15 a week when the curtain came down, because it was abundantly clear he'd never set foot on a stage before. But at least he still had a job, and he started out in repertory theater, sometimes getting paid, sometimes not, painting sets, building sets, doing whatever it took just to learn his craft in repertory theater in British Columbia. He spent 10 years in British Columbia in repertory theater, and then he made his way down into Northern California in repertory theater, and eventually to Hollywood. But all he ever wanted to do was be an actor. He loved his profession. He was a founding member of the Screen Actors Guild. His card number was number 9. He felt it so important to give back to his profession. that which it had given him, which was a lifetime of enjoyment doing what he loved most in the world, which was acting.
Oh wow. He was a tremendous actor and he's played so many fantastic roles. How do you feel about continuing to preserve and share your dad's legacy, especially with the current interest in the classic horror films today? And what is the most rewarding part of your work with the Boris Karloff estate? And what are some of the projects that you're working on to kind of help keep his memory alive?
Well, all of this is due to the fans.
Okay.
The fans perpetuate his legacy, have given his legacy the long legs that it has. We're so grateful for his fans and his work with the Screen Actors Guild. He did a lot of charity work benefiting youngsters. He just was a good man, and his fans knew that and sensed that. And his fans now that I meet are so respectful and so just they're there because they wish they come to meet me. I'm nothing but a conduit to ask me questions they wish they'd had an opportunity to ask my father. They are so respectful, so polite, so interested in learning more about him. Actually, the fans know far more about my father than I could ever learn. And I've learned so much from the fans. It's just a pleasure to go to a convention or a show or whatever and meet his fans because they are so nice and so interesting. And I learn something new every time I leave my house and go out and use my maiden name and meet his fan base. It's so rewarding. And as I said before, the fans are what have given his legacy the long legs that it has.
It's obvious, Sara, that you have a great passion to do this, to keep his legacy going, to sustain it. At what point in your life did you decide this is one of the things I really want to do? This is something that's important. Did that come early for you, or did that come later on?
Oh, it came gradually, and it's fun. I love. Otherwise, I'd be home cleaning my own oven. It's great fun, and I enjoy uh, every minute of it. Uh, what's not fun about getting to travel essentially anywhere in the world and have somebody spend their time saying something nice about your father, or asking nice questions or sharing information with you about somebody that you love.
Yeah.
It's all positive. It's all positive.
Well, that's a great attitude. It's wonderful to hear that. Originally, Sara, I was going to ask you about your favorite performance of all the performances your father did, but since you're really not a fan of horror, I'm going to change the question a little bit. I'm going to ask you this. Was there a role or a movie or a series of movies that was really his favorite, that he really enjoyed doing? Maybe he talked about it with you. Is there anything that jumps to mind that might have been his favorite role of all the ones that he did?
Oh, for obvious reasons, Frankenstein made such a pivotal difference in his life, both personally and professionally. Although he lost 25 pounds during the making of it, he injured his back during the making of it. It still made such a pivotal difference, both personally and professionally for him. I think at different times and for different reasons, he had enjoyed some roles more than others. I know he really enjoyed doing the 3 films he did with Val Lewton. They found that they had a lot in common. They both were very intelligent, well-read people. and they enjoyed one another's company. And the films he did for Val Lewton were intelligent, well scripted films. My father really enjoyed working with him and working on those particular films. I know later on he enjoyed working with his friends and uh, uh, co-horror stars, Vincent Price and um, Peter Lorre and Basil Rathbone in the Comedy of Terrors and the other film, uh, I'm trying to think of the other ones they made together.
The
And
Raven?
The Raven, that's
Yeah.
right. And they enjoyed spoofing their own boogeyman images. And those old men had a wonderful time on the sets. They played practical jokes on Val Lewton, on what who was the producer of those? He just passed. I can't think of his name. That's terrible. But they had a wonderful time doing those films, and they enjoyed each other's company. They enjoyed performing together. They enjoyed spoofing themselves and each other. So those were favorite times of his. I know he really enjoyed doing targets with Peter Bogdanovich.
Mm.
He admired Peter's voice. Peter wrote and acted in and directed that film, Targets, and my father really admired Peter and his talent and his energy, and it was a good film. And it's one of my favorites. My father essentially is playing himself, an aging old star, and it showed my father's real opinion that the horror really was on the streets, not up on the screen. And so that was another of my father's favorite films. So for different reasons at different times in his career, he had a special fondness for different films.
Targets is a great movie and doesn't get talked about often enough. I'm glad that you mentioned that and went into that in some detail. You mentioned Val Lewton, and I know that you were still pretty young when Val Lewton died. He passed away young age, unexpectedly. Do you remember at all how your father reacted? I mean, imagine it must have been very tough on him to lose a friend like that.
I have no memory of how he reacted.
No. Okay. You mentioned some of these other great actors that your father worked with, three in particular, Peter Lorre, Vincent Price, Basil Rathbone, three absolute legends. Did you get a chance to meet any or all three of them?
Yes, I did.
Tell us a little bit about each one. Let's start with Vincent Price. Tell us a little bit about him.
He was a delightful man, very educated, very knowledgeable, a delightful actor, delightful man. I know his daughter Victoria quite well, and she's delightful. I'm told that Vincent used to carry me around on his shoulders when I was quite young. I only met Peter Lorre briefly on the set, and the same goes for Basil Rathbone. I only met him briefly on the set, so I have no, I have nothing in particular as far as memory goes, except they were very kind to me.
I'm glad you mentioned Vincent Price's daughter, Victoria, whom I've had the pleasure of meeting. She's gone to conventions like Monster Bash, which I've fairly regularly attended in recent years. Did you meet her at a convention or somewhere else?
I met her at a convention.
Yeah.
But I've she's been at my home at Lake Tahoe, and I know her quite well.
And she has something in common with you, being, of course, the daughter of a famous actor, but she's also not a horror fan, just like you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Good sense.
Yeah.
Sarah, I was wondering, when you look back at your father's legacy, what is one thing that you would love people to remember about him beyond his iconic roles?
That he was the antithesis of the roles he played, that he was the kind, well educated, um, soft spoken, very funny man.
Are you going to be doing any upcoming conventions with fans in the near future that you might be able to talk about?
I hope to do Chiller in October in
Mhm.
Parsippany, New Jersey. Um, I am planning on being a guest at the Billington um, uh, Symphony Orchestra's performance on the 25th of October.
Mhm.
Um, I don't have any plans beyond that because I try to take most of the summer off to spend with family and friends.
Oh, nice. I can definitely understand that. Oh, that's wonderful. Will the information be available on your website for fans to keep a lookout for?
We have a space on our web page that shows appearances. Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Sure.
Sarah, I know that you're a kind of a modest person. You don't necessarily talk about yourself that much, but you've had a pretty good career yourself. You've had success as a realtor. You've appeared in some feature films.
Mhm.
Obviously, you do a great job overseeing the estate of your father, keeping the legacy of him going. As you look back at some of these things that you have done, any particular favorite jobs or career paths that you've had along the way?
Being a mother of two boys and the grandmother of three and the great grandmother of three.
Wonderful, yeah. And do they all live close to you?
No, they're scattered all over. They live in Colorado, Florida, California, all over the place.
Yeah. Hopefully, they come see you on a fairly regular basis.
We get together whenever possible.
Yeah. You have appeared in a couple of feature films. Did you enjoy doing those roles?
Heavens no. Few lines that I read from a piece of paper, and I really didn't appear in any of them.
So that wasn't for you then.
No, it really isn't
Yeah.
my cup of tea.
One of the towns that I love going to, in fact, my wife and I spent our honeymoon in Salem, Massachusetts 25 years ago. And it's been a while, it's been a quarter of a century, but I have vague memories of there being some kind of a store or a shop in Salem that bore your name. Am I thinking of that correctly, accurately?
There was a haunted house that
Okay.
we sponsored, and one of the things I had to do was to go through the haunted house, and I remember saying um, to the people, "Now I'll go through it, but all the lights have to be on, and anybody who jumps out or touches me is fired." And they agreed to it, and I managed to walk through the haunted house with the lights on. Nobody jumped out or touched me, and I managed to make it through, and I proved it. And I it was I don't know how long lived the haunted house was, but at least my heart started beating at a reasonable pace after I got out.
Yeah. So you never lived in Salem.
No, I never lived in Salem, but I did take a whale watching uh, ship expedition um, while I was there. It was one of the most exciting things I ever did. It was absolutely wonderful. I've never seen so many whales in my life. It was wonderful.
Oh, wow. We love Salem. We went there just a couple of years ago. It seems like it's a place that my wife and I and our family, we try to revisit every few years. It's a beautiful town. There's so much going on, and even though you may not have spent a lot of time there, was it a town that you enjoyed?
Oh, indeed. Yes. I think it has several reputations. Um, and it was certainly very gracious to me.
I'm curious, Sarah, about some of the traveling that you've done, and you've mentioned that you've gone to conventions for a number of years, and you have some plans coming up in October. Have you ever had a chance to go back to your father's native land of England? Have you gone there, spent any time there?
I try to go almost every year.
Really?
I love Britain and the UK, and I have a college friend in Northern Ireland that I visit frequently. So I love the UK. Um, uh, I love its architecture. I love its people.
Mm.
Um, I love it. I really enjoy being in the UK. So yeah, I go back often. I have visited my father's cottage in Bramshot, and I visited his resting place, and I enjoy going there.
What was his hometown like?
Oh well, his hometown was London, but
Oh, okay.
Dulwich is very nice, very nice. It's a suburb, so to speak, of London.
I had a chance to go there in the late 1980s. I spent a semester there as part of my college years. Absolutely loved it. Found the people to be great. They were much quieter than us Americans. We always stood out because of how loud we were when we were on trains or the subway, which I believe is called the Tube, if I'm not mistaken. But the people were so nice and the sights there were so wonderful. And it's been 40 years, but I still have great memories of England. And it sounds like you have a similar feeling toward that place.
I do, I do. I really enjoy it. Have been lucky enough to make some good friends there, and I enjoy it every time I go.
Well, it's wonderful that you're able to go there on pretty much an annual basis. Very nice to hear about that. Well, Sarah, we really do appreciate your time, giving us an opportunity to speak to you, learn a little bit more about your father, learn about yourself as well. The website that you run, it's karloff.com, correct?
That's correct. Thank you.
And if people go there, they can find out the latest with regard to your father, products that are offered, upcoming appearances, conventions, that sort of thing. Again, it's karloff.com. And we do want to thank genuinely Sara Karloff, daughter of Boris, for joining us over these past 40 minutes. Once again, Sara oversees Karloff Enterprises and is the daughter of the master of horror, the legendary Boris Karloff. Sara, very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Appreciate Sara Karloff donating her time in this week's episode. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, Tracy and I will talk a little bit more about Boris Karloff, some of his most memorable roles, and also some personal books in my collection, some interesting biographies of the master of horror. The Ghostly Gallery will continue after a short timeout. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Ghostly Gallery podcast. We thank you for joining us this week and hope you enjoyed our conversation with the great Sara Karloff talking about her beloved father, Boris. Really enjoyed hearing from Sara. Tracy and I, we continue on this week's program, and Tracy, want to give us some thoughts about this great man, this tremendous actor who is really so synonymous with the genre. He passed away in 1969 at the age of 81. He was continuing to make films really right up until the end. His health was declining at that point, but he kept making movies. Sara mentioned one of the late movies that he made, outstanding film, Targets, with Peter Bogdanovich, It's a film that doesn't get talked about enough. By the time his career and then ultimately his life had ended, he had compiled over 200 credits in film and television. We, of course, remember him mostly for those 3 Frankenstein films, the first in Universal series. Of course, there was the original Frankenstein, 1931. Then we had The Bride of Frankenstein, 1935. And then a few years after that, the third film, Son of Frankenstein. He did not want to do any additional films after that. He really felt that the character had sort of played itself out. And of course, Universal ended up turning to other actors to play the monster. Lon Chaney Jr. and Bela Lugosi, of course, come to mind. And then there are the films that he made where he was not necessarily in costume or in makeup, but still played villainous characters. The Black Cat, a movie that he made with Bela Lugosi, outstanding film. And he plays an especially evil character. I mean, Bela Lugosi comes across as a saint compared to him in that film. And then there might be his greatest acting role ever, and that's The Body Snatcher. And it's not to say that he wasn't great as Frankenstein, but those were largely physical roles, although in the second film, Bride of Frankenstein, he did have some words. He did acquire the ability to speak. But in those films, it was mostly a physical effort of acting while he was wearing all that makeup. And of course, that was very cumbersome in its own right. But in terms of just pure acting, The Body Snatcher might have been the role that forced him to kind of do the most. He gave a very nuanced performance as the cabman John Gray, very charming and charismatic, especially with children. But then you saw the other side of him as he was, doing his various deals with the local doctor, his confrontations with the Lugosi character. Of course, they had a memorable fist fight there in that particular film. But that was a film that, in terms of pure acting, that might have been the top of the mountain for Boris Karloff. And of course, there were a lot of other great films. I was mentioning to you before we started the show with Sarah that one of his best roles was in an early 60s anthology called Black Sabbath, featured 3 short stories. He was kind of the host and the narrator. He introduced each of the stories, but he also played the villain in a story in that film called The Wurdalak, which is basically a Slavic vampire. And he's really frightening. It's the only time he ever played vampire in a film. It's hard to believe, over 200 film credits. Only once does he play a vampire, and he's absolutely terrifying. And for some reason that we don't know, he never played that kind of a role again, even though he did handle all these other monstrous characters. So that's kind of a quick overview of his career. I'm curious, Tracy, when you think of someone like Boris Karloff, what are some of the images that come to your mind, some of the characteristics of the way that he came across on the screen? What do you think of when I say the words Boris Karloff to you?
A very strong actor, very kind, and believe it or not, just because of his role as the monster, very empathetic. Like, I feel a lot of empathy. And I think he was really tremendous. And I still have so many more movies to explore. But over the last, I'd say probably couple of years, I've been watching a lot more. I actually just watched The Bride of Frankenstein for the first time a couple of weeks ago before we chatted with Sam Irvin. And that was a wonderful film, just wonderful. So I have a lot more to go, but everything I've seen has been wonderful.
I didn't know that you hadn't seen Bride of Frankenstein until then. What'd you think of it? That's a film that a lot of those lovers of Universal horror classics, they feel that's the best of all those films. I happen to like the original Frankenstein a little bit better, but certainly Bride is very highly thought of. What'd you think of it?
Oh, I loved it so much. I really loved that movie. And after I watched The Bride of Frankenstein, I followed up with the film, Gods and Monsters. So
Mm.
I kinda did them hand in hand, but again, it was just wonderful. I thought the imagery alone was fantastic, just beautiful, actually.
Yeah. It's interesting. Boris Karloff did not agree with James Whale's decision to have his monster speak. But he, of course, learns how to speak when he visits with that hermit that he kind of runs into in the woods.
Mhm.
He didn't really like that, but he makes it work, as he always did. He obviously took every role seriously, and he did what his directors and his bosses wanted him to do. What did you think of the monster speaking in that film? Some people like it, others, like Boris, didn't care for it.
I really liked it. I think it just really helped a lot with that empathy factor, just to
Hmm.
see him in a different light. Like, he wasn't really a monster. Like, I just felt empathy. And for him to be able to speak in that role, I I thought it was wonderful, actually.
Can you imagine what it must have been like wearing that makeup for hours on end, wearing those heavy boots, having to perform all these physical roles? And he had problems with his back at long junctures in his life.
Mhm.
I mean, we sometimes forget just how much of a physical effort he must have had to go through in making these movies. And, when he made Frankenstein in 1931, it's not like he was in his 20s. He'd been
Mhm.
making movies for a while. I want to say by that point, he had to be in his 40s, I believe, if I've got the timeline right. The physical demands of playing that role must have been severe.
Yeah, and I would think too, just the makeup alone from back in that time period, it it would have been a lot different, and the prosthetics a lot heavier than what something like that would be today.
Yeah.
So I can't even imagine. I mean, the heavy makeup, the heavy clothing, just the body, like, just the aches and pains on the body at the end of every
Yeah.
day. I can't even imagine.
And it's unfortunate too, because I think, as great a director as James Whale was, he took advantage of actors like Karloff in terms of the physical demands. There weren't as many protections for actors. This was probably one of the things that motivated Boris Karloff to really become a founding member of the Screen Actors Guild, to provide them
Mhm.
with some level of protection, because they really were mistreated. I mean, they were expected to give blood in these roles. I mean, it was a bit much.
Yes, no, I agree, and I know just listening to, some other stories too for, like, Lon Chaney and Lon Chaney Jr., some of the things that they went through as actors back in the time period as well, just with the physical stunts and stuff that they would have to perform. Just I can't even imagine what it was like back then.
Yeah. I'm curious, Tracy, did you ever see The Body Snatcher?
No, that is now on my list along with Black Sabbath.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you'll enjoy The Body Snatcher. It's very different from Frankenstein. He does play a human character, but he is supremely evil. But at the same time, he does have these layers. He's great with kids, especially the young girl who, needs an operation, and she, um, her plight is really kind of a main story in this movie. And the way that he interacts with her is not the way that you would expect a monstrous villainous person to do. But he's able to show those different sides to this villainous character. I think you'll really enjoy The Body Snatcher. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Black Sabbath as well. That story, I believe, the one that's called the Warlock, is the longest of the three stories,
Mhm.
and he is really frightening in that film, in that role. So I'll be curious to hear what you have to say about those roles. I'll give you 48 hours to watch both, and we'll get back to you on that.
I think I
I,
can do it.
No, take your time. Take your time. Savor them. I also wanted to talk, Tracy, a little bit about some of the books in my collection. I have a growing collection of horror books that's really it's grown exponentially in the last 10 years. And I have several books about the great Boris Karloff. The first one I ever read was maybe the earliest biography that came out. It was 1972, and that would have been only 3 years after he passed away. It's a book written by a writer named Peter Underwood, and it's pretty easy to read. It's about 200 pages, and I think it's a pretty good representation of his life, and it goes into some detail on the pre-Frankenstein years, those early struggles that he went through. And of course, Sara Karloff mentioned, his early career was not easy. He was sometimes not paid. Fame did not come to him until 1931. And by then he was an established veteran actor. It took him a while to become a household name. And I think this book gives you a pretty good understanding of what he went through. Another interesting book is called Dear Boris, The Life of William Henry Pratt. That, of course, was Boris Karloff's real name. And I don't think he actually legally changed his name to Boris Karloff. I think he signed documents as William Pratt. But anyway, Cynthia Lindsay, who wrote this book, knew him personally, was friends with Boris. And as Sara Karloff mentioned off air to us, Cynthia was her godmother. So she knew Cynthia very well. And this book has a lot of personal recollections. It's really a terrific read. I don't think it's in print anymore, but you can probably find it on Amazon. I found it by chance in our local used bookstore here in Cooperstown, which doesn't really specialize in horror books or horror subjects. It specializes in baseball because we got the Baseball Hall of Fame down the road. But this book came out in 1975. Alfred A. Knopf, the publisher out of New York. And it's an excellent read. If you can get your hands on this book, it does have great personal stories and also some wonderful photographs, many of which were probably never seen before. They show Boris with friends and family. So that's Dear Boris by Cynthia Lindsay. And then the third book I have in my collection is a book by a friend of ours, Tracy, and that's Gregory Mank. This is a book that he did for McFarlane, Karloff and Lugosi, The Story of a Haunting Collaboration. This book has had a couple of editions. This is the first edition, which was done as a hardcover. And I actually bought this at Monster Bash as a used copy, and then I had Greg sign it. This was back in 2018. And it explores all these films that Boris and Bela Lugosi did together. And there were 8 total, many of them memorable, including The Body Snatcher, The Raven, The Black Cat, others as well. And the book does a very good job of debunking this whole idea that Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi were enemies, that they didn't get along, that they argued. There was some tension between them the first time they were on a film set, and there may have been a little bit of tension in later collaborations, but they actually got along pretty well. I think calling them enemies, which people have done for years, is really not accurate or fair. So Greg Mank, as he's able to do, is really able to explore that, sift through some of that nonsense, and give us a much better understanding of what their relationship was like, as well as, some of the behind the scene stuff that went on with these films that they made together. And there were 8 of them. In some of the films, they had kind of equal time. They were both co-stars. In other films like The Body Snatcher, Boris was the more prominent character, whereas Bela was maybe a secondary character. But, to think about it, these are the 2 supreme legends of horror. To get them on screen 8 different times, including all these classics, it's really wonderful that we have this film remembrance of these guys together. So that's a third book. I believe that this book in its new edition is still in print. You can probably order it from McFarland. You could certainly find it online at Amazon.com. And it's a really good read. Of course, Greg's a great writer, tremendous researcher. But again, the title of this one, Karloff and Lugosi, The Story of a Haunting Collaboration. So those are some thoughts on 3 of the books. There are others, but these are the 3 that happen to be in my collection. Well, Tracy, we came around too late to meet Boris Karloff in person. To interview him would have been the thrill of a lifetime, but we were able to do the next best thing, and that is talk to his daughter, his only child, Sara Karloff. Kind of a thrill, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's been such a privilege just to be able to have the opportunity to speak with Sara about her dad tonight.
And then you think about the passing of time. He died in 1969. So we're talking 56 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
And there still has not been anybody that has matched his accomplishments in horror. I think it's still Karloff 1, Lugosi 2, and you can probably argue whether 3 would be Vincent Price or Peter Cushing or Lon Chaney Jr. or Lon Chaney Sr., but it's still Karloff at the top of the mountain. And we've had some great horror actors and some great films in this modern era of horror, but no one still has been able to match what Boris did, either in terms of volume of films or in quality, in terms of the number of masterpieces that have been done. Even though so many years have passed, more than 50. It's incredible that he's kind of the Babe Ruth, if we can use a baseball analogy. He is the Babe Ruth of horror in many ways, and that hasn't changed.
No, I totally agree. I'm just an absolute icon for sure. So many great films and a lot of great memories, actually.
All right, Tracy, that'll put a wrap on the show. I want to thank you for your thoughts on Boris Karloff. We certainly appreciate, and we also are glad that we've given you more homework assignments, more films to watch. We hope you enjoy The Body Snatcher and Black Sabbath, which was inspired by the rock group, by the way. Actually, no, it's the other way around. The rock group was inspired by the film. Apparently, they were in England, the members of Black Sabbath, and they saw that film being featured on a marquee, and apparently that is what motivated them to name their band Black Sabbath. So yeah, there's a connection.
Cool.
Yeah, kind of amazing. All right, thank you, Tracy. Of course, our thanks to Sara Karloff for joining us as well. And one more time, the website for the Karloff estate, karloff.com. Please visit it, support it. The Karloff legacy is important, obviously, to Sara, but also to all horror fans as well. We appreciate all of you fans for joining us in this Museum of the Macabre, and we do hope that we'll see you again next time right here in the Ghostly Gallery.